Hey, cold, snowy day here in Michigan, and so I'm going to catch up on a viewer video that was requested. Some questions from a Robert Phillips, and he has some great broad range of questions. First, my parents want to pre-plan their funeral. They're in their 60s and they have a funeral home in mind. He has an interest in death care and was a psych major. Do you have any advice to help me help them with talking to them before they go to the funeral home for the pre-planning meeting? So when you pre-plan your funeral, there's a broad range of why you want to do that. Some people just want to get biographical information on file. Sometimes people want to pre-fund, or they just want to go over their options. So it depends on why they want to go in and what they hope to accomplish. Honestly, my best advice is to go watch my making arrangements video and walk through those things with them, or get my arrangement packet where you can get all of your information together before you go to the funeral home. Know those questions that you want to ask going in. Know your rights. So these are some questions, some videos that I've done that will answer these questions. The Know Your Rights video, the arrangement video, the pre-planning video. So go ahead and check both those couple videos out. I hate to point you to another video, but check those out. It's great information about going and pre-planning or arranging to prepare you what to bring, what questions to ask, what information to have on hand. I am 22 years old and have had a few people close to me either suddenly die or in their 30s. Is it odd if I start talking about pre-planning at such a young age? I don't anticipate anything happening, but want to be prepared if something happens suddenly. How do I discuss this with a funeral home if I am curious in getting a quote? So you don't have to explain anything when you go to get quotes. If you just want pricing, ask a price for what you want. You don't ever have to explain yourself. You don't have to give your name. You don't have to give your anything. You can just get a quote of a price. That's the beauty of the FTC rule, is that you don't have to explain anything. You can get the information you want without the funeral home locking you in by getting your information. However, if you're wanting to have more of a conversation, you definitely want to sit down and talk to somebody and plan it out. My husband has always said, why doesn't everybody pre-fund, especially when it locks in that pricing? And every 15 years, price doubles in the funeral business. It's just on record. That's kind of how it's been trend-wise for the last 100 years. So if you can lock in pricing, but it's always your money that never goes away, even if the funeral home does, then it's always beneficial to you. So also when you're young, you want to make sure you get a will in place, and especially like having a medical advocate and things like that, because if you are younger, not married, you want to make sure your parents can make those decisions for you, because it's not always the case just because they're your parents, because you are a legal adult. It doesn't just roll over all the time. So you want to make sure you have things in place. I know whenever I go on a business, whenever my husband and I travel together without our kids, we update our will and make sure it's how we want it, because we want to make sure that if we die together on this trip, the person we want to have our children has them, because your family doesn't get to decide that. You want to make sure, if you are parents, that you have a will in place as to who is going to get your children. Otherwise, the court decides. Your family doesn't get to decide. So make sure you have that in place. And I always update with like just a casual to my parents, like, hey, this is where I want to be buried, or this is what I want, or, because every year or so, my thoughts about my funeral change. They just do. They're going to evolve as your life evolves and as your situation evolves. So I'm always constantly keeping notes or updating or making changes to what it is I want, either legally with my will or casually with just notes about my service. How does a person have a conversation with the funeral director about having a green funeral? This could be either no embalming or formaldehyde-free chemicals used. Here in Western New York, I only know of very few funeral homes that do this, but something that could be asked during pre-planning when a death occurs, as in, can the special chemicals be ordered for when a person does die, or does the person either need to be embalmed regularly or direct burial cremation? So, yeah, it's knowing, going and asking the questions like, what is available in our area? So like where I am, there's one green burial cemetery. And I say this because they have not he, as of a couple months ago, never actually done a shroud burial there. He's always used a cardboard box. To me, that's not green. They do also mark all the spaces with stone in where the headstone would be. They're like stones that are engraved. To me, that's not green, like it's not natural, you know, that you're still marking that space. So it's not as green as I would anticipate green to be, I guess. There are options though at cemeteries that you can use a bottomless vault, and you could put the person right into the earth with a bottomless vault, because a lot of cemeteries, if you discuss it with them or if you approach the township board ahead of time and get it prearranged, you can do some of these other options. Using a vault is the biggest to a lot of cemeteries around my area, whereas some are very open to the bottomless vault option, and kind of like Muslims do in our areas in some of the cemeteries, because that's allowed, whereas a non-vault is not allowed. So it's kind of meeting in the middle for some of these requests, but also going along with what the regulations are that they have. And in terms of the fluid, you could discuss with the funeral home what they have and what they have available and what the options are. Even formaldehyde-free fluids still have, you could have glutaraldehyde or something else, so it's still chemicals. So it's really, what is your angle as to why you're asking that question, is what I would ask you in return. Why are you asking this question, and what are you hoping to get from that result? Because it's more than just you asking that question. I think it's a conversation that you have to figure out what exactly you're going for in the end. If it is a natural, then don't use the fluids at all, because fluids still have chemicals and still have, you know, things in them. So it's not like you're getting away from everything. So it's more of a conversation than just what this question, I think, arises. How do you approach a family who's coming with a family member who passed away who's overweight, say 300 plus pounds? I know this is a sensitive topic for families, but how do you tell them that they may need an oversized casket? How does this add to the cost of a funeral? I ask because I know a few funeral directors who say it takes longer for embalming and cremation and pass the costs on to the families. So I did do a video all about this, and it got a huge negative response from a lot of people, because they were misinterpreting what I was saying, unfortunately. Families are not charged based on weight. It is charged based on services and merchandise used, just like anyone. You buy folders, you pay for the folders. You don't buy folders, you don't pay for the folders. So when it comes to overweight, and the thing is somebody could be 300 pounds and not need a larger casket. It's all about how that person's built. You know, if they're 5 foot tall and 300 pounds, they're definitely going to be wider than that casket, standard casket allows. And standard caskets come in like a 2 to 3 inch variance. So some caskets have been created that are a little wider inside, to fit into a standard vault still, but give a little bit of extra room. However, we measure at the widest point, so whether it's elbows or hips or shoulders of the person across, and see if they would fit in a standard casket. And if they don't, then we have the discussion with the family, and we say, just because of your loved one's size, we do recommend, you know, sometimes it's because they're right at the size. We say, they are going to look a little uncomfortable, and this is totally up to you if you want to use a larger casket. If they're for sure not going to fit, then we show them the options of what the person would fit in, and say, because of their size, we do need to look at some specialty caskets, or caskets that they'll fit in more comfortably. So it just depends on the funeral director how they phrase things, and show them those caskets. They use more material because they're larger, so they do cost a little more sometimes. But there are traditional caskets that cost more than them. It just depends on what it's made out of, you know, the material, and what the charge is from the casket company, because some families still want, you know, this type of a casket. It's still going to be more. It would be more in the traditional line either way. So it just depends. And it also depends on the funeral home and how they want to charge a family. If they have to bring in 6 to 8 people for the removal when they bring the person into their care, they may charge more for that because they are paying that many more people. And it's just the situation. And unfortunately, this has probably happened when the person's been moved before, or that they've had to have an ambulance move the person, to the hospital, or, there's been charges because of the situation up till now. And some of this I'm talking about kind of extreme, where we're like 800 to 1,000 pounds. And my friend just in the last year has embalmed someone who is 1,200 pounds. Functionally, it is hard. And it's not me whining as a funeral director, but it is, us trying to do the best we can with what we have. And no, you don't keep equipment around for that once in 10-year situation. You don't upgrade all your equipment. That's a huge expense when you don't, do people that are that heavy that often. So we do the best with what we can. I don't know anybody that charges more for more fluid, because yes, you do use more fluid, you do use more items, but I don't know people, and that is up to them whether they're going to charge more. Some people charge for embalming an autopsy body more than they do a standard body. However, autopsies are required by the state. The family doesn't request that in a lot of situations, and so same thing, it'd be passing down a cost because there's more involved. Some funeral homes do it, some funeral homes don't. So it really depends on, the business and how they run and operate. And it's not that they operate badly, but if it's a small funeral home, they have a very marginal overhead and expense line. They can't put out, a whole bunch of extra money on a call without recouping that back from the family. Do you ever have a family ask if they can spend some time with their loved one before they are prepared? When my grandparents passed, I know the funeral director asked my father and his siblings if they wanted to see them in the prep room, to spend some time alone with them before they prepared them. Is this a common thing with funeral homes? Do they usually set the features before allowing that? I've never had a director ask, or seen that a director has asked a family if they wanted to spend time in the prep room with somebody. I have had families come in that they didn't see their loved one at the hospital or after an accident or something, and that was the most important thing to them, is they wanted to see them and they wanted to see them now. And so we did allow them to see them. I try not to do that in the preparation room, especially if you have other bodies in that preparation room, other deceased. You can't do that for their privacy. So I would typically put them on a dressing table, bring them into like a side chapel, and bring them in to see their loved one. Yes, I would close eyes, close mouth before I did that viewing. But I've never had a family want to do that viewing before preparation happened specifically. I don't think. I'm trying to think back over the years. And I don't think I've had that. So it's interesting. I'm wondering why they offered that, or if that's something they always do there at that funeral home. Have you ever had people ask if they could try out a casket when planning a funeral? This is something people joke about it. Hey, can we take it for a test ride? And I've never laid in a casket. I know people who do. To me, I go by that. It's a law. Like, you don't reuse a casket. So to me, once somebody's in it, whether they're alive or dead, it's being used. So to me, it's the sanctity of that vessel, essentially the casket, that it is used. It is one time somebody is going to lay in that, and somebody is going to use it, and that is theirs. So to me, it's not cool for somebody to even joke around laying in one. My half-sister died in Germany in Air Force Base. They had a viewing in the States. She had European makeup, really heavy and thick painted on eyebrows. We wish the funeral home that accepted her into their care from the German funeral home would remedy this, but they refused to until she was in their care, and still refused. How does a family deal with this professionally? So she is your I hate to put it this way, but she's your property. She is still your loved one. So you have full control over how she looks and what they do. So you have every right to tell a funeral home, you need to change this. You need to do this. So unless there's an extenuating circumstance, like she had some severe decomposition, so she had to have heavy makeup, or she had some trauma, or, you know, depending on the situation, there may have been a reason for some of that. However, ask for explanation. Why is her makeup like that? Because that is not how we want it. And get an answer for yourself. You've paid a lot of money for services. Make sure they are up to your standard. If we receive somebody in that looks, you know, crazy, or they're leaking, or something's going on, we're going to fix that. But we go by what the picture of the family has provided for makeup and hair and everything. So if you give us a glamour shot that has some red lipstick, we may go with that look because that's what you provided. So to us, that's what your expectations are. So make sure you're discussing and having conversation, and don't just remain quiet. Ask and get an answer that is what you want, either by rectifying the situation or understanding why something is that way. You know, you are as much in control of the services and the funeral and the visitation as the director. They're not there to dictate what you're doing. You were there to hire them for a service and to make sure that they are living up to what it is you are hoping to have in the end. Because otherwise you then have a bad impression of the funeral director. You then have a bad impression of the whole business or industry as a whole, and we don't want that. So make sure you're satisfied in the end with what services you receive, and take control of that. You wouldn't go to a restaurant and just take the food that was put in front of you rather than what you ordered. You would say, I want the correct food, and I want it warm, and I want it good. And so you're going to want what you've paid for in any situation. So why not in that same situation? So Robert, thank you for your questions. Some of these are pretty heavy questions, and as you can tell by my answering, I really try and find the right wording, because I know some of these topics people are going to be offended no matter what I say. And I want you to know the honest answer and some transparency, but I do search for the right words to say to try to piss off the least amount of people by some of this, especially if with the obesity and everything. It is hard to answer some of those with knowing that I am going to get some backlash. So I tread lightly, as you can see. But if you have any more questions about any of these were some big hitting questions. Check out, I do have videos that have talked about a lot of these in depth, but I like to give these bits of answers too as we're going through. Thanks so much, Robert. And as always, send me questions. Kari at karinorthey.com if you have some that you would like answered for a viewer video or just in general. I will see you guys soon. Bye.